Good afternoon, everyone. Olga Tamanova is with you, and I'm happy to greet you at the Media Center Ukraine, Ukrinform. Today, our team has prepared for you an interesting schedule. It's an agenda. Ninth year of war, 120 days since the full-scale invasion, and I thank all who work on telling the world about our fight. So today we propose you the following events. At 1 o'clock, Andriy Demchenko will join us. That's the spokesperson of the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. And we will talk about the situation on our borders. At 2:30, there will be traditional briefing on defense topics. We'll speak about the situation on the front line. Hanna Mahler, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, will join us. Alexei Hromov, Deputy General, and Deputy Director of General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexei Natochi, Head of the Operations Office of the Main Directorate of National Guard of Ukraine, and Alexei Serhiev, Head of the Organizational and Analytical Support and Operational Response Department of National Police of Ukraine. And right now, our speaker is Yuriy Poita, Head of the Asia and Pacific Section of Center of Army Conversion and Disarmament Studies. And we will speak about the political situation in Central Asia. So please, Mr. Yuriy, tell us what is happening right now. Dear journalists, good afternoon. I'm happy to greet you. I will try to be brief, but explain the situation regarding Central Asia, regarding Kazakhstan, and on the context that we recently saw, because Zhamat Tokayev, president of Kazakhstan, he was visiting St. Petersburg Economic Forum and made a series of statements that international environment and in the Ukrainian environment were perceived positively for Ukraine. And there were thoughts that as if that's humiliation of Putin and making distance of Kazakhstan from Russian Federation. How to interpret the situation? I think we have to understand that there's not only narrow context of this event, but also wider geopolitical and geoeconomical context. We have to be aware of the priorities of Kazakhstan in foreign policy, and what is the place of Russian Federation and Ukraine in it. Kazakhstan, it is the state that an index, regarding the index of democracy, it's an authoritarian regime. It's a closed political regime of authoritarian type. What it means? It means that the information that is in open source, it is thoroughly checked before, and to receive access to data that would assist in analysis of actual information in the internal policy or foreign policy of Kazakhstan is quite difficult. That's the first finding. Secondly, we have to be aware that Kazakhstan is really dependent on Russian Federation in series of spheres. Firstly, its economy. We have to be aware that Russian Federation is about 23%. It's 25 billion of Kazakhstan trade. It's last year, 2021. Also, Russian Federation is very important for Kazakhstan for transit, because all the transit, it's about 30% to the European Union. Of Kazakhstan transit is related to European Union, and it's done via Russian Federation, also via current oil pipeline. Therefore, Russia is very important. At any moment, it can just switch Kazakhstan off from foreign markets. Also, we have to be aware that it's quite serious investments of the Russian Federation currently are made into Kazakhstan at $17 billion. That's joint ventures, Russian enterprises and Kazakhstan territory and so forth. So from the economic standpoint, Russia is more important for Kazakhstan. I can compare the trade of Kazakhstan with Ukraine. That's in 2020, that's $700 million. That's 30 times less. Ukraine is 30 times less important economically for Kazakhstan than Russia. Also, we have to be aware that from international perspective, Kazakhstan is in all the international organizations that are headed by Moscow. That's Common Defense Union and Eurasian Economical Union. After 120 days of war, we don't see any signs that Kazakhstan somehow would step away from those organizations. There are annual events, events on the level of Ministry of Defense, economical institutions, etc. New programs are made, and we see the deepening of cooperation. In autumn this year, there will be international training with troops of the Common Defense Union, with Kazakhstan troops as well. There will be drills. So Kazakhstan does not lessen the cooperation with the Russian Federation. According to international cooperation, we see the big coordination between Kazakhstan and Russia on the international platform. Also in the UN, if we see how Kazakhstan votes on Ukraine resolutions, in the General Assembly of the UN, there are 2 resolutions. They always vote either negatively or neutrally. It never votes in favor of Ukraine resolutions. And this is one of the indicators that Kazakhstan thoroughly shapes its foreign policy, and in many cases it coincides with Russian view. Also, we have to be aware that defense complex of Kazakhstan is a big leverage of Russian Federation and Kazakhstan. Everything that flies and everything that drives with weapons in Kazakhstan, that's all Soviet or Russian platforms that are serviced accordingly and repaired accordingly and trained, personnel is trained accordingly. So dependence on security dependence on Russian Federation is also important for Kazakhstan. And defense complex of 2 states, they're very dependent on each other. There is Tunis enterprise in Kokshetau in Kazakhstan, in the north, and it produces spare parts for all the planes and helicopters of Russian Federation. We don't see that in public sphere, but the main markets of sales of those spare parts for aviation of this enterprise is Russian Federation and Belarus. Also, in media sphere, Kazakhstan depends on Russia a lot. On the territory of Kazakhstan, all the TV channels of Russia works, and that mold the Russian view of the situation in the community. It's difficult to say, to evaluate how the community is pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian, because, as I was mentioning before, Kazakhstan is a closed type state, and there's practically no open social studies. But part of the population, large part of the population, evaluates this conflict from the Russian position. And the education is also a big dependency. Also, the expert environment, we're looking at analytical centers of Kazakhstan, also state analytical centers. The majority of employees, as far as I saw, I was sitting in Kazakhstan for a long time and conducted a lot of analytics. The majority of employees, they evaluate the situation on more pro-Russian view than pro-Ukrainian. And the last aspect that defines big dependency, the events of January of this year, after protests that happened in Kazakhstan, and as a consequence, there is a big reconfiguration in the country in favor of the current president, Mr. Tokayev, and the exclusion of all the close persons from first president, Mr. Nazarbayev, from the economical service, from the economical institutions, and from the security services. And this was one of the consequences of joint troops into Kazakhstan, joint troops activity in Kazakhstan. So the actions of current elite, this multi-vector policy that was developed by Nazarbayev, currently it's more inclining towards Russian vector. So what can we do? What findings can we do? Firstly, Kazakhstan is the ally, stays the ally of Russian Federation from economical and military point of view and in the level of political elites. Secondly, when we don't observe any practical steps that would demonstrate distancing of Kazakhstan from Russian Federation. Kazakhstan continues saying that it's politically neutral. It does not support the war and supports peace negotiations. However, there are no statements that would condemn actions of Russian Federation and war crimes, etc. And we don't see any actual steps regarding weakening of cooperation of Kazakhstan and Russia. And Kazakhstan currently, it's there is low probability that will assist Russia in military and to the territory of Ukraine. There is low probability, and there is certain data that Kazakhstan could become a gray area for Russian Federation for avoiding the sanction. Kazakhstan denies it, but there are indicators that could state that. There is relocation of Russian companies to the territory of Kazakhstan. There is registration of Russian companies in Kazakhstan in the Eurasian Economical Union to avoid sanctions. Also, the companies that are under sanctions and belong to sanctioned Russian oligarchs. Also, this could be some intermediate companies with the help of which Russian Federation could procure sanctioned equipment and products from Western countries via Kazakhstan, not directly, but via Kazakhstan to Russian Federation. Third could be relocation of Western business, because part of Western business, actually, Western companies, they're interested in continuing business as usual, as they say, with the Russian Federation. And for them, if they exited from moral standpoint from Russian Federation market, they could the same way consider the opportunity to coming the Kazakh territory with further export to Russian Federation. And one of such directions, it could be supplies of sanctioned equipment, for instance, for enterprises of oil and gas production via Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan has similar economy structure, similar companies that also require that equipment, and Kazakhstan can procure similar equipment under sanction and transfer it to Russian Federation. Also, there are certain signs that Kazakhstan is ready for that. There are statements from Kazmunagaz that, if necessary, that will be done. Currently, we can state that Kazakhstan remains the ally of Russian Federation, and what happened in St. Petersburg Forum, it's not humiliation of Putin, because all the relations continue and all the coordination with Kazakhstan within the bilateral relations and all the unions continue. Kazakhstan is not a friend of Ukraine, but it's not an enemy either. It's a partner, and maintains pro-Russian neutrality, so to speak. For Kazakhstan government right now, the main task is not to worsen the relations neither with Russia nor with the West, with the European Union, because there are two important partners for Kazakhstan government. Therefore, Kazakhstan tries to continue that trend, and the changes that would demonstrate closing to Ukraine or furthering from Russian Federation, distant from Russian Federation, we do not observe. I thank you for this intro into context, but we heard the statements not only in the form that we thought as not only a simulation of Putin, but we heard the statement of President of Kazakhstan that about over appreciated role of Russia when the troops of ADKB enter the territory of Kazakhstan. It doesn't speak of anything as well, or is it a system policy of Kazakhstan? Currently, there are two serious problems for Kazakhstan. Look, first, in the international image. And Kazakhstan, with those statements, tries to demonstrate that, first, they're neutral and independent from Russian Federation. Also, possibly, to ask Western companies to more intensively cooperate with Kazakhstan. That could be used by Russia to avoid sanction. Second direction is improving the image of Tokayev president in the community, because after the events in January, a quite big part of the community looks at President Tokayev as independent from Russia. That's really dependent from Russia. And it worsens the image of the President Tokayev and makes like a Putin's marionette image. And for President Tokayev, it's important not to repeat this the mass process will not repeat it. To win the election in 2024, he needs to improve the political positions. And this statement that the role of Russia was overappreciated, it was the role of ADKB for security of Kazakhstan, from my standpoint, it's the attempt to decrease this narrative that Kazakhstan is dependent on Russia, that Tokayev is dependent on Putin, and that there is a serious dependency from Russian president. We, from the other hand, we have to be aware what is the ADKB. It's the organization where absolutely all the decisions are made by Moscow. And other countries that are in the part of the organization, in the most part, they're just facing the facts, or they're pressured at, and they fulfill the tasks that are set for them. So the operation of ODKB that happened in January this year, this is, in this essence, was governed by Moscow, by Kremlin, and the role of Moscow was colossal, was big. We understand that for Kazakhstan, Russia is a strategic partner. However, doesn't it seem to you that Kazakhstan looks for alternative strategic partners as well? For instance, Turkey, that could replace Russia in this niche. For a long time, Kazakhstan tried to conduct a multi-vector policy. We could see that during the presidency of first leader of Kazakhstan, Elbasi, the father of nation, as it was called, and now he's excluded from this status, Mr. Nazarbayev. He tried to develop a relationship with China, with Turkey, as the counterweight of Russian impact. But according to a series of studies, the Russian vector, even back then, was a dominant vector because the political connections of political elites with the Russian Federation, it remained quite serious, quite big, and the activity of Russian secret services in Kazakhstan territory was quite strong. So the additional vectors, also Turkey, also Chinese, they remained the side and assistance vectors. Now it's difficult to say if Kazakhstan will develop those additional counterbalance to counter Russian weight, but according to the results of January this year, China didn't play any role on stabilizing the situation in Kazakhstan or political dialogue, etc. So we see no signs to that. Also, Kazakh experts think that role of China, regardless that China is a neighbor and one of the most important markets and trade partners for Kazakhstan, it has the limited role and less important than Russia. In Turkey direction, there were also attempts to develop at the expense of the Union of Turk States, the organization that was created recently. But the serious steps, we didn't see any serious steps on deepening the cooperation. Possibly we will see them, but the indicators, there are none right now. To your colleagues, your questions, please. Ukrinform, how probable it is the use of OKDB forces in war against Ukraine? I think right now has very little probability, also including military aid. It's not probable that Armenia, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan forces will be involved with war against Ukraine. However, there is a serious, like, military technical aid is also, there is very little probability to it, because any movement of military echelons from Kazakhstan to Russian Federation and further to Ukraine, it will be immediately detected with a satellite intelligence, so forth, so everybody will be aware. And for Kazakhstan, it's a serious risk, because automatically it will fall under sanctions and will become one of the participants of the war. And it will lose all the Western markets that are really important for Kazakhstan. The European market is dominating, is 30%, over 30% of Kazakh trade, and over 40% of Kazakh export. However, how they can assist? Firstly, via the line of defense cooperation, via repairs, for instance, of Russian military equipment, via supplies of spare parts. Of course, if Russian military airplane was down to the territory of Ukraine, and we see pretty often that a lot of equipment in it also was produced by Western companies, but we don't see the equipment produced by ODKB countries. But the spare parts that are located in this military airplanes, in those mechanisms, it might not even be mentioned that they are made in Kazakhstan. It's an open issue. Also, the direction that I think was considered by Russians is the use of peacekeeping forces of ODKB. As a part of AKB, there are peacekeeping forces, and in each country there are peacekeeping forces that are a part of the joint peace forces of AKB. And recently there is improvement of legal base of Russia and ODKB countries about possible use of peacekeeping forces of ODKB outside of the national territories of ODKB countries. I think Russian Federation considered this probability. If Ukraine within 10 days or 3 days would cease existence as a country, they'll form a marionette government, for instance, that would call for ODKB peacekeeping forces to stabilize the situation. So that could have been on this so-called stabilization stage. We see little probability for it in the future, but we see that the peacekeeping forces of AKB, they are being improved. That was stated during the last session of AKB on the level of ministers of defense. There are plans to improve them and the plans to use them outside the national territories of AKB countries. I don't think they'll be used somewhere in Africa or in Latin America. So such development of events is also in theory possible. Can Russia use AKB countries to avoid sanctions of Russia, procuring via those countries some equipment that could not be procured directly? Yes, that could be done. There are small indicators to that could confirm that. Kazakhstan, on the official level, denies this probability. It says that they will maintain the sanctions. In any case, they will not break the sanctions. This is also the signs of strategic communication of Kazakhstan. They try to demonstrate to the world community, to the international community, to the world, that they are a reliable partner, they're a responsible country, and they will not violate the international law. However, like I've mentioned, this relocation of Russian companies to the territory of Kazakhstan is ongoing. Each month, they register over several hundreds of Russian companies. And there's data available about it. On the territory of Kazakhstan, they register their juridical addresses in Kazakhstan, and that means that the sanctions might not be applied to them because juridical address is different, the location of office is different. Also, we saw some companies like retailers, big retailers, Russia, there's Magnit and Lenta. They tried to make new logistic chains to receive the goods that for some moral norms are not supplied to Russia, for Russian companies, to receive them via Kazakhstan. There were signs to those attempts. Also, in gas and oil sphere, Russian Federation is really dependent on Russian equipment to produce and process oil, and also they need repairs and spare parts and expendable materials. In Kazakhstan, there have similar companies that are in the same niche. That means that each year, instead of procuring some part of bores or equipment, they could procure just bigger amount of them to transfer some to Russia. Of course, they will not announce it officially, but there are certain signs of such intentions. Because, as I've mentioned, the head of Kazmunagaz, it's a monopolist basically on the market of gas and oil market in Kazakhstan. One of their heads said that if Russian Federation, for instance, after they have a break of Caspian Pipe Consortium, it's a pipeline from Kazakhstan to Russian Federation and further to Europe. If on this pipeline will be certain breaks, and Russian Federation would need some spare parts that they could not be able to procure from the West, then Kazakhstan would help them with them. I thank you, Yuriy. Poita was with us, and I remind you the next briefing will be at 1 o'clock, and we'll speak about the situation on the state borders of Ukraine. Thank you. Stay with us.
Дякую вам.